Greetings. Welcome to HKpresents Blacknificent. I am Dr. Jamil Harrell Sims, CEO of HKpresents Interventions Incorporated. And this is our final episode of Blacknificent. Boy, do we have a treat for you. But the first thing I need you to do, if this is your first time with us, I need you to like, subscribe, and comment. And if you've been with us through the whole season, like, subscribe, comment. Make sure you hit that bell so you know every time we upload something, you'll know. Now, with no further ado, I want to introduce or reintroduce to some of you our resident scholar, Harold Shujaa Baker. He is a D-Town, Detroit native, engineer, and he is the co-founder of the Afrikan Restoration Project. Without further ado, this is a dynamite episode. You have got to kick back, relax, and put your thinking cap on. Go ahead, brother.
Well, hey, since you spoke to my Detroit origins, I should begin representing properly with a good old "what up, though." You know, that's how we get started in Detroit, right?
Right.
I'm pleased as always to be here today, and I'm excited about this conversation too. So the title of my presentation today is "The Lost Industrial and Spiritual Technology of Ancient Kemet," and that's what we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about the lost spiritual and industrial technology of ancient Kemet. I'm gonna use the reality of the Great Pyramid of Giza as the point of reflection here for us to do that. So without too much chatter, I'm going to just go ahead and get to my screen, share my screen, and we'll get into the presentation. Let's see. So again, lost industrial and spiritual technology of ancient Kemet. This is going to be a book review and a discussion that's going to center around two texts. But to get it started, since we're talking about ancient Kemet, began with some of the wisdom from ancient Kemet. Of course, ancient Kemet is ancient Egypt, which for those who might be geographically challenged is, in Northern Africa. Let there be no question that Egypt is in Africa. And from the book of Coming Forth, which I'll speak to a little bit more in just a second, I want to share this quote, which says that the shared task of God and humans is one of maintaining ma'at in the world. This in turn means maintaining the creation and the rightness and righteousness of the order this implies and necessitates. Thus, the texts repeat over and over again each king and queen's commitment to restoring, establishing, and expanding ma'at. It says that heaven is at peace and earth is in joy, for they have heard the king will set ma'at in the place of isfet. In other words, right in the place of wrong, or order in the place of disorder. Ashe. Ma'at here, for those who aren't familiar, ma'at is the ancient Kemetic moral and ethical system that defined and established. It's a moral and spiritual system that defined the social order and structure of ancient Kemet, and is fundamentally the reason why that society thrived for so many millennia. And made the contribution that it did to the fourth floor of human history. So when it talks about ma'at, restoration of ma'at, is talking about the restoration of truth, justiceness, propriety, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and righteous order in the context of the society, and pushing out isfet, which is another term for chaos or disorder. The primary text for the spiritual technology portion of our discussion is the Book of Coming Forth by Day, The Ethics of the Declaration of Innocence by Dr. Maulana Karenga. And Dr. Karenga is professor and chair of Africana Studies Department at Cal State Long Beach. He is the foremost exponent of Ma'atian or ancient Kemetic ethical thought, having developed over the last 3 decades a creative and scholarly Kawaida interpretation of ancient Egyptian ethical thought as a living tradition and a useful philosophical option for critical reflection on the urgent issues of our time. As an activist scholar of national and international recognition, Dr. Karenga has had a far-reaching effect on Black intellectual and political culture since the 1960s. And of course, he is most widely known as the creator of the Pan-African holiday Kwanzaa and its related value system, the Nguzo Saba. The primary text for the technical portion of our discussion is the Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt. That's written by a engineer, long-term engineer by the name of Christopher Dunn, who also happens to be a white man. And I don't have a problem with that in the context of this discussion, and nor should you, because Christopher Dunn is a scientist first. And in the course of his uncovering this information that I'm going to share with you, he has run against the establishment, which knows much more about the pyramids than they will reveal, because that will require them to give credit to the people that they don't want to give. And Christopher Dunn has repeatedly stated that he doesn't care about all of that. He's not concerned about the agenda that the Egyptologists may have in terms of suppressing certain things. He's only concerned about the science, and the record of his work is consistent with that. So I don't have a problem using his work as the technical basis for this conversation today. He has an extensive background in engineering, and for over 50 years, he worked at every level of high technology manufacturing. Let me move this screen. Back up. From machinist, toolmaker, programmer, and operator of high power lasers, industrial lasers, to project manager, and even laser operations manager. His pyramid odyssey began in 1977, though, after he read a book titled Secrets of the Great Pyramid. And his immediate reaction after learning of the Great Pyramid's precision and design characteristics was to think that it may have had an original purpose different from what is commonly suggested, right? As engineers, we have the capacity to see things that other people don't, right? Once he became aware of the artifacts that are there and had access to them, his eyes and his experience revealed things that a philosopher or an anthropologist's eyesight might not reveal in terms of what that structure was for. So after further research and study of source material on various theories, Chris concluded that it must have originally been built to provide a highly technical society with energy. In short, it was a very large machine, or more precisely, a power plant. Discovering the purpose of this machine and documenting his case took the better part of 20 years of research, leading to the 1998 publication of Chris's book, The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, which describes a holistic energy device that is harmonically coupled with the earth and its inhabitants. We know that ancient Kemet is the greatest advanced society of antiquity, but we don't know or often think about the power source that fueled such a civilization. The technology of harmonic resonance is the answer, claims renowned master craftsman and engineer Christopher Dunn. In a brilliant, absolutely brilliant piece of reverse engineering based on 20 years of research, Dunn reveals that the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually a large electrical power plant that produced and converted vibration and sound energy to electrical current and potentially microwave radiation and a wireless energy network. The author shows how the pyramid's numerous chambers and passageways were positioned with deliberate precision to maximize acoustical qualities, explaining, perhaps for the first time, how every element in the Great Pyramid worked together as part of a functioning machine, not a royal tomb. And of course, this info is undoubtedly known by some people. Known by some people who don't want to reveal that because, of course, again, they would have to give a different level of credit to the people of the pyramids than has been desired, right? Now, I have to explain that I come to this conversation with 35 years of related experience myself. You know, I've done all types of electromechanical product and system design over the years. So I have a fundamental understanding of what's going on here. I will concede that I haven't wrapped my mind around every aspect of what Christopher Dunn puts forth, because he talks about lasers and chemical reactions and things based on residue that exists in the pyramid today that I am not as well versed on as the electrical generation part of it, right? So I need to do a more thorough analysis of this myself. I need to visit the pyramids myself, right? But based on my experience, what I know from my work and my studies, and what I've read and gleaned from this text, what he's put forth here is not only a viable and plausible conclusion, but is the most reasonable one that has been put forth about what the purpose of the Great Pyramid was, right? And I currently provide consulting services for electromechanical design and prototype manufacturing, and been doing that, as I mentioned, for 35 years. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I wanted to show a few examples of some of the projects I've worked on. And I've done everything, and I'll go into it here. An example, first shuttle flight experiment I worked as lead designer on that. That launched in 1992. That was a high profile project that tested solar cells and different metals, and the data collected from it applied directly to the power system. It went into designing the power system, the electrical power system for the International Space Station that's on orbit right now. And I was lead designer on the mechanical side, not the electrical side. So I don't want to take too much credit for that. But nevertheless, I had a significant role in it and had a deep understanding of it. Here's another example of a electrical system that I designed, a handheld powder paint gun that produced an electric field of 100,000 volts right in the front of the gun that the paint would pass through and would collect that charge and would be attracted to electrically grounded metal objects, you know, and that's how the painting happened. Again, I don't want to get into too much detail on that, but that's just an example of some of the work that I've done. Here's an example of a special effect, one of the many special effects I designed during my time consulting for Disneyland and Walt Disney Imagineering. Here's an example of a money machine that I helped design many years ago for Diebold Corporation, also produced a functional animated simulation on that. And let's see, here's a second shuttle flight experiment that I worked on called Microscale Hydrodynamic Study. That was PhD level fluid physics that I worked on, did the mechanical system design in conjunction with the NASA Glenn Research Center and Carnegie Mellon University Department of Physics. So I've been around, and my most recent engagement was with Calnetics Technologies down in Cerritos, California, and they make high-powered electric motors and generators. So I've been deeply involved in electrical system and component design for, you know, quite a while, and I'm still doing that today. So I just wanted to provide that as a little bit of background. But what's important now is to kind of set the stage for how ancient Kemetic society thought and operated, particularly as it related to science and technology, right? And from one of his other texts, Dr. Karenga assists with that with this quote where he says that our task is to synthesize the growth of science. Let me minimize this because I keep doing this. To synthesize the growth of science and technology with the need for human sensitivity and morality. In this way, we contribute to the historical project of humanizing nature without denaturalizing and dehumanizing humans, right? In this text, the Book of Coming Forth, by day, there's a quote that says, the world as a common ecological environment is currently under several kinds of pressure, including the problems of pollution of air, water, and soil, depletion of other natural resources. The threats to the environment not only affect the possibilities of future generations, but the very existence of the world as we know it. Clearly, an ethics that links life in a holistic framework and makes it morally compelling to respect both the social and the natural is needed. There's another quote that says, Martian Ethics stresses a holistic approach, positing an indestructible unity of the human, divine, and natural. It is, even in its ancient form, committed to a just, good, and righteous order in the social and natural realm. From this, one can evolve a social and environmental ethics, which are interrelated and interdependent. In fact, the obligation to preserve the environment for ourselves and future generations derives from the same ethics to preserve and promote human life and development. For it compels us not to do anything which would deny or diminish the chances for a full and fulfilling life for each and every person. Now, what does that mean in the context of this discussion? What it means is that ancient Kemetic society was grounded in a set of moral values that placed our lives, the environment that we live in, and the interrelated link between those two as foremost concern, right? In the development of their science and technology. They weren't driven by a desire to find new ways to kill people, which is one of the prevailing driving forces of technology in the modern world. They weren't concerned about material profit and gaining, control of the natural resources to dominate other people. They were trying to find ways to use science and technology to be in harmony with the universe, the world, all around us. They would never have been content to burn fossil fuels as a way of powering their society because they were too keenly aware of how destructive that type of thing would be to their society. So instead of doing that type of a thing, they sought out, found, and developed ways to power their society in ways that did not in any way, shape, or form bring hurt, harm, or danger, destruction, violation, depletion, and all of those things to the environment around us, right? And the pyramid power plant is a perfect example of that. So here we have our first look at a cross-sectional view of what is presented and what exists in the Great Pyramid. And I'll go into a little more detail on that. You'll understand the imagery a little bit more as we go forward. But inside of it, everything relates to this system that Christopher Dunn described. Of course, what's been put forth, the myth that's been put forth is that the pyramids were tombs, royal tombs, but they've never found a body in a pyramid. They've never found an actual tomb. They've never found a mummy. They've never found anything in a pyramid that actually shows that it was a tomb, certainly not the Great Pyramids. Instead, what we have are a series of chambers and a whole lot of precision manufactured components that lend themselves to a system function, right? And again, Christopher Dunn has explained all of this. So again, I have an understanding of the concepts presented and the broader ideas being suggested, but I have not visited the pyramid complex to confirm or deny the evidence found there. That's one of the things about us as engineers. I want to see it myself to confirm it. I'll lend my name to the credibility of it, or the plausibility of it, I should say. But I won't offer a confirmation of it until I see it with myself and I'm able to test it with my own equipment, which is pretty much what Christopher Dunn has done here. Also, although I have read this entire book twice, actually, I haven't studied it with repeated reviews and related technologies and the other technology that it introduces to me, like lasers and such, to fully assess its theories from a critical systems analysis. However, based on my read and the perspective gained through over 35 years of experience that I have, I find its assertions to be plausible and worthy of further examination and experimentation to be confirmed or dismissed. In fact, my ultimate goal would be to produce a scaled replica of it to show exactly how it operated, and I'll be moving forward with that later in the year. So I'm going to do a very quick summary of the chapters in this book and breeze through some of the imagery and everything. This presentation is coming from a presentation that I gave, a book review that I gave that was at least twice as long. So I don't have the opportunity here today to go into as much detail, but I don't want to leave any stone unturned, right? Give you some perspective on what's there. So in chapter 1, which is titled A New Paradigm, A New Order, and chapter 2, which is titled Questions, Discovery, and More Questions, the author reviews what is known and believed about the pyramids, considered against the evidence surviving there today. This raises many challenges to commonly held beliefs that the ancient Kemet II, which is the Kemetic people, were technologically limited, or that the pyramids were originally constructed as tombs. Ultimately, these chapters challenge any theory of the pyramid's original intent to include a complex explanation of every structural element remaining, but to also include an explanation for how each element relates to one another. That's critical. If you're going to explain the whole system, you're going to explain the pyramids, you can't just suggest, as they do, that what's called the King's Chamber. You can't do that without offering a clear explanation about how that relates to all of the elements in there, right? Chapter 3, titled Precision Unparalleled, shatters traditionally held beliefs that the ancient Kemet II were limited to brass and copper tools and coarse or manual labor manufacturing, where they were using chisels and hammers and stuff like that. Dunn shows that the extremely large and heavy granite, quartz, and other hardened stone and metal materials required far more capacity than manual labor alone could produce for the large-scale manufacturing and transport effort required. By inspecting the Great Pyramid as it exists today with modern inspection equipment, Dunn shows incredibly high precision manufacturing techniques were used in their construction, requiring far more than coarse tools and manual labor. He showed how the level of precision that they achieved across these objects was comparable to the highest level of precision that we're able to achieve in modern manufacturing today. And he shows that with the imagery and a fully detailed discussion here, making reference to the flatness of some of these super large blocks being equivalent to 0.001 across the entire surface. In this case, he's talking about, in this text, actually a 1/100th variation across 35 square feet. That's a huge surface to maintain that level of accuracy. And he didn't just estimate that, he inspected that with modern inspection equipment, right? And goes through a ton of details about the precision that he was able to document that exists in there, right? In chapter 4, titled Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, that shows evidence of tool mark patterns consistent with those produced in many of today's large-scale precision manufacturing processes. The pyramid stones and surrounding quarries show clear evidence of precision machining requiring sophisticated manufacturing techniques and a power system to drive them. Because you don't machine granite with the force that a human being can produce. You need horsepower. You need high wattage systems. You need high power systems to be able to machine granite and stuff like that. Chapter 5, titled Amazing Discovery at Giza, further examines the precision manufacturing techniques required by examining, again, remaining artifacts. So it's important to note that his thesis isn't based on what he read in the text. It's not an interpretation or something that was revealed, through some spiritual revelation. He's looking at the evidence on the ground today. Irrefutable, as far as I'm concerned. So these are images of some of the quarry marks showing, saw bits and drills and things like that. Talking about, there's a large discussion talking about holes drilled with such precision that it's inconceivable that they would be doing that with manual tools. So all of this detail in this discussion just leaves no room to doubt it. And he provides copious images to explain all of it. Again, that requires more time than we have today for me to go into it in great detail, but nevertheless, it's right there in the text for anybody who would endeavor to go in and access it. The granite boxes, the huge granite boxes, and the level of precision in the corners and on the surfaces, it's absolute. I mean, we're talking about huge structures here, 7.5 feet deep, 11 feet tall, 13 feet wide. My goodness, that can't be done with manual tools. That level of work can't be done with manual tools. That's why they say they don't know how they were built, because they don't want to acknowledge that the people of that day had the capacity to do this type of precision work with the equipment that would be required for it. Chapter 6 in the book is one of the most interesting. It addresses long-standing questions about how the ancient Kemet II moved such large blocks of stone across the considerable distance between Giza and the very quarry sites, and how they were able to lift those stones to the heights required during pyramid construction. Comparisons are made between those required efforts and the efforts of a single man named Edward Leedskalnin, who has a property called the Coral Castle down in Florida State, where he is known for single-handedly manipulating and moving and positioning and repositioning these super huge blocks of stone using the simple principles of physics that were also applied by the ancient Kemet II. That's a wonderful, fascinating chapter in the book. And then again, he goes into great detail to explain that and how it relates, how the techniques that Leedskalnin was using would have been used by the same, in the same way by the Kemet II to move their multi-ton blocks. And he mentions here 22-ton obelisks and 23-ton blocks and things of that sort that are found there. And then he also, and it's all based on magnetic principles, right? And that's physics. But he talks about how properly understood principles of electromagnetism can be applied or induced to make the lifting of these objects so much simpler and the type of thing that can be done single-handedly. Very interesting chapter. Chapter 7, titled Endeavoring to Explain the Enigma, summarizes these open questions, while chapter 8, titled The Giza Power Plant, engages the power plant theory in detail. This introduces the science, physics, and engineering principles I want and need to examine further to gain a greater command of what Dunn proposes from a systems level. As we do in our systems development, we always create a model or prototype to test what we propose our system, our design, or our system will do. And as I mentioned, I'm about the business of working on a prototype for this during this calendar year. So we'll be having further discussion about that, Dr. Sims.
Looking forward to it.
Pardon me?
I said, I'm looking forward to it. They don't, this is good stuff and we need to know this.
Yes, yes. I mean, can you imagine how our young people's perceptions of themselves and what their people have contributed to the world would change if they understood that African people were the first people to harness the power of electricity for practical purposes. It wasn't Thomas Edison. It wasn't Nikola Tesla. It wasn't Alexander Graham Bell. This was African people who did that, right? I mean, if we had an understanding of that, it would be impossible for us to only think of ourselves as consumers of science and technology, or victims or targets of science and technology these days. We would understand that it is our role to be on the forefront of technological development. We should have a total command of everything happening in the world technologically right now and be on the forefront of advancing that, right? So if we had an understanding that would of our ancestors' contribution in this way, I believe that would contribute mightily to us developing the perspective, the self-concept that's necessary for us to transform ourselves or restore ourselves in that way. So again, he talks about the energies and the way the energies are acting. And what he's talking about essentially is a system of energy conversions that are not unlike what we experience on a daily basis in the modern world. In fact, we are at this very moment experiencing the benefit of energy conversions, right? Because I'm talking into a microphone and you all are hearing my voice through a speaker of some sort. A microphone takes sound energy and converts it into an electrical signal. A speaker does the exact opposite. It takes an electrical energy and converts it into a sound energy. And in the simplest terms, that's exactly what was happening in the pyramid. The pyramid took a vibration, an induced vibration that comes with a sound. Like, you know, when we create when we have an earthquake, those vibrations create a sound, right? So the pyramids created that vibration, captured the sound, directed the sound through a series of channels and chambers that then converted that sound and that vibration energy into an electrical energy, just like our speaker and our microphone is doing right now, right? So it's not inconceivable, because we have that same technology being applied in our world today, right? And this is an indication of some of the science, the physics, the mathematics that are applied, and that Christopher Dunn interpreted in his examination of the pyramid. So all of that detail is there for anybody to figure, to understand. And again, the detail is compelling. Of course, it requires a certain technical perspective to be able to consume it all, but nevertheless, it's there for anybody who has the inclination. Chapter 9 through 11, titled the Mighty Crystal, an Amazing Maser, and a Hydrogen Generator, respectively, go further into the science and physics to explain how vibration energy is captured and converted from and to sound, and how that energy applies a force upon quartz crystals present in the upper chamber, or what's called the King's Chamber, and how that is activated by a hydrogen generator catalyst in the lower chamber, or the Queen's Chamber, to create electricity to power ancient Kemetic civilization. And this system level conception, again, where all elements are explained based on surviving artifacts and evidence, is far more viable as an explanation for the ultimate purpose of the Great Pyramid than a tomb. That whole tomb thing goes out the window. It makes absolutely no sense, you know. I mean, once you see what's there, and again, because no bodies, no remains have been found in the pyramids. Again, all of this detail about the process of conversion and the components that are there. What we're looking at here are images of the components that are there, and his explanation for how they all tie together. Leaves no room. I'm gonna put all of this in my model. So again, all of these details on the upper chamber, the lower chamber, and the chemical processes and all of that. Chapter 12 through 15 includes a fascinating discussion on evidence of catastrophic failure in the power center, which was the King's Chamber, resulting from a hydrogen-induced explosion that pushed the monstrous stones of the chamber walls out of their original alignment by a full inch symmetrically. In other words, there was a huge explosion in the King's Chamber that blew those huge walls off their original position in an even pattern around, right? And there's evidence there today of that, right? And that would explain broadly. Certainly it offers a viable explanation for how and why ancient Kemetic society collapsed. Because if you think about it today, if our power grid, if our power system were to fail, the civilization would collapse, right? We would have utter chaos going on. So if this was their power center, the center of their power system and in their society, and they suffered a catastrophic failure, well, then that changes everything, right? And these chapters summarize the findings put forth by Dunn and explain his overall system thesis. These chapters also revisit evidence that ancient Kemet harnessed the power of electricity for practical purposes. It closes with a discussion on how the evidence found at the Giza complex today disputes or renders meaningless current and previously held assumptions about the purpose and function of the Giza of the pyramid at Giza. And then this is some images of where he's tying together the evidence from the pyramid with evidence from other structures in Kemet, right? Like, for example, the wall carvings at the Dendera temple that shown here on the right, figure 72, that represent a light bulb with a power source and electrical cords, right? And the science behind that, the science that represents, is similar to an object in the modern world known as a Crookes tube that would operate under the same principles that the light bulb shown there, carved on the wall at the Dendera temple, would operate on. So again, those who know can make parallels, draw parallels between what's there and what exists in the modern world, so that there's no dispute about the connection between the two, right? I want to show a couple of short videos, and I have time for this, so we're doing good on time.
Yes.
Show a couple of short videos that actually show how this system operates, right? It's one thing to try to explain it. It's another thing altogether to show how it operates. This also gives us an opportunity to hear from the author of the Giza Power Plant book, Christopher Dunn. And thirdly, it also gives us an opportunity to get a taste of some of the BS that's out there about these things, right? Because not only is the modern world reluctant to acknowledge that the ancient Kemet too had made these discoveries and had harnessed the power of electricity for practical purposes, but they want to suggest that to the extent this evidence exists, it is not evidence of an advanced human civilization. They suggest that it's evidence of an alien presence.
Yes, I have heard that, and I find it quite interesting.
It is
that we're being locked out of technology.
Hey, it's
interesting.
I mean, like I said, in order to acknowledge this, they would have to, rightfully, they would have to give credit to the people that they don't want to give, So, so you're going to get a taste of that. And I put that in here because that's what we're up against with this, and people needed to be aware that that's out there just as much as they need to be aware of this other information that I'm sharing. So this is just a couple of minutes long, and I'm going to stop my share now because I don't think I told it to share audio, and I'm going to go back in with the audio being shared and make sure that we're good on that. So let me see.
Ever since scientists have been studying the Great Pyramids there at Giza, there has been speculation that they may have been energy generators, some kind of power plants. And of course, the mainstream Egyptologists are saying, oh, these are just simple tombs for pharaohs.
But the Great Pyramid has the precision of a machine, and so when you consider it as a machine, you see that there are certain functions that each part of the pyramid performs. The subterranean chamber is evidence itself, and it has been demonstrated by an engineer by the name of John Cadman, who created a model of the subterranean chamber, and by feeding water in it, the chamber itself seems to cause some very unusual reactions in the pyramid.
The water would rush down the shaft of the Great Pyramid down to the subterranean chamber, which was about 330 feet. It would bypass a valve, and then the valve would slam shut, and it would cause a shock wave to be sent up the Great Pyramid itself, and then it would shoot towards the ceiling that was directly below the King's Chamber. It's a freestanding granite tuned room, and it would cause that to resonate at a specific frequency.
The granite is the same material that you would use in a microphone or a telephone. It vibrates through the introduction of sound, and it emits electrons. Well, you take that phenomenon and you control it inside the Great Pyramid, then you have a machine that can vibrate that granite as much as an earthquake would vibrate granite in the earth and create electromagnetic energy.
Christopher Dunn's theories indicates that the Great Pyramid was sending microwave signal to a satellite. And in fact, studies of his working devices have shown that this probably would work. We could have been sending messages into space. It's very similar to the SETI program that's sending out messages right now, trying to attract the extraterrestrials to contact us. Christopher Dunn's theory will change forever the way we look at the ancient Egyptians, their civilization, and where they came from, and where they got their knowledge and technology.
Engineer Chris Dunn believes the answer can be found by further examination of the shafts in what some call the Queen's Chamber, where traces of zinc and hydrochloric acid have been discovered.
I believe the chemical coming in through the northern shaft was hydrated zinc, and the other chemical coming through the southern shaft and into the chamber was dilute hydrochloric acid. These are actually seen on the chamber walls.
Dunn suggests that the two chemicals were poured down through the shafts and then mixed together inside the Queen's Chamber, triggering combustion.
This vessel represents the Queen's Chamber. Into the tubes, we're going to pour hydrated zinc and then hydrochloric acid. When you bring these two liquids together, and a chemical reaction occurs, and a product of that chemical reaction is hydrogen. And you can see the vapor, the hydrogen, escaping through the chimney. And there you have the reaction.
Dunn speculates that the hydrogen gas traveled from the Queen's Chamber into the King's Chamber. Then, the vibrations from the subterranean pool energized the hydrogen atoms into a microwave energy beam.
The evidence that indicates the use of hydrogen can be found in the King's Chamber. There is a shaft in the King's Chamber has dimensions of 8.4 by 4.8, which would be suitable for a waveguide for a maser, or microwave amplification through stimulated emission radiation. And from there, we can actually propose many different ideas of what they did with it.
But it was used to communicate with a satellite, or whether it was used as a wireless energy network. And what's important to note here too is that the man who is credited with designing the modern electrical system, AC, a man by the name of Nikola Tesla. You go to any credible study of his life, it talks about his deep affinity for ancient Kemetic studies. It talks about how he was deeply engrossed in the study of ancient Kemet. So when we hear a celebration of his brilliant mind, he becomes like so many other European scholars who have been informed by their access to ancient Kemetic knowledge, which the ancient Kemet too aren't given credit for. He's viewed, I mean, he has patents on wireless power systems that he was able to secure using these same principles and the same technology that Dunn has revealed here. And again, when he talks about some of the more complicated aspects like the hydrogen production, again, he's not speculating about that in the fullest sense. His perspective on that is informed by the chemical residue that exists in the pyramid today, and that has not had any other reasonable explanation for why it's there. If it's a tomb, why do they need hydrochloric acid in there? What is that all about? If it's just a tomb, that makes absolutely no sense, right? So he's getting into it. And again, I give him credit for weathering the storm, because he faces constant pressure to offer some distorted perception of what he's uncovering, because it doesn't align with what the Academy has been saying for so long, right? So,
well, you know, Richard Pryor, when he had his show back in the days, and they were in the pyramids,
you know
and the
what?
brother was like, "These are Black people,
You know what?
man," and they locked him up in there because they didn't want the world to know.
You know what? That clip belongs in this presentation. That clip belongs in this presentation. If I had thought about it, I certainly should have put that clip in this presentation, because anybody who's not familiar with it needs to go and see that clip of from the Richard Pryor show, of them going into the pyramids, because that is exactly what is going on here and what I'm talking about, right? So let me close out. I'm gonna share my last couple screens and get ready to close out. So let's see. And I'm going to be here on this one. Get ready to close this out. So again, besides the loss of a holistic morality that places respect for earth and people above the pursuit of profit, one of the greatest things lost from ancient Kemetic spiritual technology is the common understanding of human beings as electromagnetic systems, constantly influenced by and interacting with natural and man-made energy sources all around us. What does that mean? That means that we, human beings, are electromagnetic systems, and we have at all times a measurable electrical energy flowing through our system, through our body. The level of the voltage flowing through our bodies at any given moment is directly affected by our proximity to other electrical systems and electrical devices, right? I can put a meter on my hand right now to earth ground, and I can detect low level voltage right here in this space right here. But if I go to an area like in my kitchen where I'm around the microwave, I turn the microwave on, I have a lamp on, I have 4 or 5 other electrical devices in close proximity to me, you're going to see a higher level of energy in my body because of my proximity to these other sources of energy. Ancient Kemet understood that. And so the production of this energy wasn't just for powering manufacturing equipment and stuff like that. It was tuned for health purposes for human beings, because they had an understanding of how our systems work, as how our bodies work as electrical systems, right? And all of that is particularly meaningful in the COVID era, as I mentioned earlier, where science-based evidence shows that our interaction with and response to the concentrated electromagnetic energies newly being projected from 5G towers, newly appearing everywhere with the recent introduction of 5G, has some impact on the human body, right?
What? Say it again. Say it louder for the people in the back.
There's absolutely, this isn't conspiracy theory for all of the foolishness that the term conspiracy theory represents. This is indisputable, irrefutable science that is widely known and even documented by the companies behind the introduction of 5G. They understood the threat, the potential harm during the introduction period, and you can find that in their data. And it's so interesting how the negative effects that human beings suffer to those new energies being projected replicates viruses. It has a similar effect on us as viruses. And then, of course, if we look at history, like with the Great Flu of 1918, that also corresponded with an introduction of a new level of electromagnetic energy in the environment, right? And any major introduction of new levels comes along with a cost for a period of time until the human body adjusts to it all, right? So that's what we're dealing with right now here. And that explains why it's so important that we reconnect with the lost industrial and spiritual technology of ancient Kemet. So I want to thank you, Dr. Sims, for the opportunity to share this information and present this share this presentation for the audience, and to get this conversation going, because we need to get into it.
I can't say it enough how we push our kids into sports and entertainment, but we will not push our children into science. Yeah. We will not push our children into medicine. We will not push our children, not even understanding that science, mathematics, technology originates with us. It's in our DNA.
Indeed, but let's say this, to give credit where credit is due. What I think you mean to say is that we don't push our children into those disciplines in large enough numbers, because there are some of us, I'm a model of that. My children get this nonstop, right? Just like others, who are aware of this, impress the same things upon their children. And there are countless numbers of our people, not enough, who are professionals in these disciplines. So there are some of us who are making this connection, who are teaching our children these things. So we don't want to disavow those people, because we have to acknowledge them.
You're right. You're right. Because I've done the same thing with mine.
Yeah.
What I mean to say, being in the academy, I don't see enough of us.
Indeed.
There's not enough.
I wrote
when they're kids, hey, go join. Sports has its place. It's discipline. It helps with certain things. But honestly, and if you have a gift, you can sing, you can play an instrument. Music in itself is science.
Yes.
But right now, when you take a look at everything, they'd rather play the video game, some, than to build it.
Yeah. Well,
if you look at there's a place up in Northern California. I have heard numerous complaints that when tech hit big, and San Leandro and those areas in Northern California, you would be remiss to find one of us in one of those companies.
Well,
we need to continue to do what's in our DNA and continue to build and create, because that's what we do.
Well, what we're up against is the perceptions that we discussed in my last presentation.
Yes.
Here, right? Which is this notion that our history began with our ancestors in enslavement. So many of us are stuck on that narrative and that sorely diminished perception of who we are. We have yet to fully reconnect with the teaching of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, for example, who taught us that people have done what people can do. And if we reconnect with an appreciable understanding of the incomparable contribution that our ancestors made to the foreflow of human history in every field of endeavor, then and only then will we become the best possible version of ourselves. So we got work to do, but it begins with an understanding of our absolutely unlimited capacity and the perfectibility that lives within all of us.
And many of us don't know our history, or we know some or limited. That is not, we are in a country that has a Eurocentric education. So we're not taught about ourselves, but now in these times, it is our responsibility to learn. And this is why we did Blacknificent. It's not just Black History Month. We got to get that out of our head. It's 365.
Right.
We have to learn who we are. There's huge thunder going on. It just scared me. So if I jump, it was very loud. Sound like what I heard in Jamaica. but we
Wow,
we're
that
talking about
reverberated too.
electricity, and look what's happening.
Yeah.
The ancestors are speaking.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's imperative that we learn our history all year. It's imperative that we make sure that our children are understanding that everything pretty much in the home that they touch, we had something to do with.
Yeah.
Technology is the future. It's not going to go away. And for us to be able to build, we need to get in it. And if they won't open the door, or maybe they open it just a little bit because it's fashionable, because that's what I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing some symbolism and no tangibles. Don't wait for them to give you the opportunity. Create your own opportunity.
Absolutely.
You are the first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You are the prototype, the blueprint.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you don't need to beg anybody for a seat at their table when in your blood you know how to build your own.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And that's a good point to ponder on the way out. You know, it is up to us. You know, I mean, in this day and age, it is indisputably true that not knowing is a vocation of the will. You
Yes.
have to, it's almost, you have to almost run away from knowledge today. You know, we have these little devices at our fingertips at all times. And through those devices, we can have access to virtually any source of information, any type of information that we would be interested in. So to not know, to still be grounded in distorted perceptions of who we are and limited understanding of what we have done and therefore can do, is a responsibility for that person in that position to correct. And we have it within us, you know, to do that. We just have to recognize that is within us and then do the work that's necessary. For me, I mean, learning about this stuff is like food. It's like water. It's like breathing air, you know, and it is incomprehensible to me how more of our people aren't driven by this. But, you know, we're just like any other group of people. If you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
And the more of us who become aware of this knowledge and begin exercising ourselves and our own understanding of it, the more will come. So again, it's been a pleasure to share this information today and be part of the process, necessary process of exposing our people to this knowledge that has not been taught, you know, as part of our daily experience, but is so critical to our understanding of who we are and what we need to become.
Well, brother, again, I want to thank our guest, our resident scholar. I so badly want to say doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, you know, that's what you are in the spirit anyway. But I want to thank Brother Harold Shujaa Baker for opening for us and closing for us. Blacknificent.